what happened, right? Like what are the basics of what happened last weekend, as far as who got held hostage, by whom, and sort of like the timeline. Does anybody have that you want to kind of you have
Well,
that, Eric?
it started in Cullyville, Texas, and your suspect is going to be Malik Hakrab. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Probably not.
Malik Akram. Akram is the last
Akrab.
name. Yeah.
And essentially he went into he got here through the United States 2 weeks ago, ending in part of December, made it into the United States through was it Manchester?
Yeah, he came in. He came to this country on a tourist visa that he applied for
About a month ago, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, later part of December. Got here, bought a pistol. It's unknown where he got that pistol from. Made his way down to Texas. I guess at this point, from as far as I know, Hamidy's probably got a little bit more insight on this than I do. Unknown why he chose Texas, but he went down to Texas and chose really the most random of Jewish synagogues. One really hard to find. It's not in any major city. It's in a more of a quiet town. Off of the beaten path, not even in on any major roads. He stayed at a couple of homeless shelters for about 3 nights, all religious, owned and ran homeless shelters. Went to the mosque twice. Got kicked out of the mosque the first night because he tried to sleep there. They wouldn't allow him to. He came back the second day to pray. And then shortly after that, he went over to the synagogue. Actually hung out at the synagogue for quite some time. Got to meet a couple of people. They said that he was in good spirits. He wasn't acting crazy, wasn't acting abnormal. Actually got to meet I guess, what do you call a pastor at a Jewish church?
A rabbi?
A rabbi. Met the rabbi, talked to him briefly. They got on with the sermon, and then at some point in the sermon, he got up and took everybody hostage. It was live streamed on Facebook. The whole incident lasted 11 hours, ending in Hakrab's death at the end. All the hostages were okay, but there's
the
a bigger
rabbi
picture
ended up
here.
taking a chair, right, and pitching it at the right time, and then they bolted for the door and got out. And then
So there's a lot
FBI
more to
went in
this story than just the hostage thing. There's the politics that are involved in it. There's the tactics that are involved in it. There's the FBI's involvement in it. Whether or not this was a terrorist event or not was on debate for a while. I think it's now been summed up by the president that it is a debate. So we got a lot of things to break down. But in a nutshell, that's kind of what happened.
Sweet. So Mike and Butch, from your perspective, because you're knee deep in this protective world of worship spaces, why do you think it is, and I hope this is a decent question to start the conversation with, is why do you think it is that we see churches, there's schools and there's churches, right? Like, but leaving the schools aside, why are churches such seemingly a common target for someone that would want to do violence, right? Whether it's terrorist related or not. Why do you think places of worship are a common target?
Yeah, man. So to me, what we've seen, I think, the bad guys they're smart enough, right? So they're looking for soft targets. Often they mistake niceness for weakness in our churches, and a lot of times that can be true. And so that's what we've been trying to do, is kind of get around that. You can still be kind. You can still live your religious beliefs while still without suspending all suspicion and skepticism. And so I think they are targeted in large degree because of that. And then also on that side, I mean, if it's ideological, it attracts typically your religious beliefs. They rub with whatever ideologies are out there that don't believe what you believe. And so those wanting to make a statement and what have you are going to choose you because they don't believe what you believe. So that's a couple thoughts.
Anything to add to that, Butch?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think inherently, too, a lot of these guys that do these attacks, obviously there's a huge mental health issue, right? These guys are screwed up, pretty whacked, and obviously they're, if it is in a religious affiliation, that's an ingrained, very deep-rooted sense of righteousness, whatever. We stand up for things. Don't argue about politics and religion and these kind of things. We understand, our beliefs are our core, and we're going to fight and die for those kind of things. We're going to make statements based on those kind of things. It sparks a fire within us. And then, like Mike said, church people are kind. They're opening, they're willing, they're invitational. A lot of times they use God as an excuse to be timid or meek. We don't have to be weak men to defend ourselves. It's not unbiblical. That's not unreligious, or whatever term you want to call it. So, you get these crazy dudes that have some radical beliefs, or they're just mental health issues, depending on what kind of an attack it is, and they attack churches and schools.
So I think it's funny that we bring up mental health in this, and I'm not trying to be argumentative here, but while I've dove into this case, I hear nothing but mental health.
His family is saying that, right? Over in the UK, they're saying he has mental problems.
Right. But, when you have a white kid shoot up a Charleston church, all we heard was, he had a rebel flag in his room. He's a right-wing racist. He's a right-wing terrorist. And if you do any research on radicalism, and you're trying to look at terrorism by the numbers, if you just Google terrorism by the numbers, even though the mass majority of terrorism is conducted by the Islamic State or Islamic extremists, all of the articles are going to quickly jump to right-wing terrorism and how it's growing in the United States, even though we've only had 63 deaths by right-wing terrorists. And then they label right-wing terrorists in such a way that, and I'll read it to you here shortly, but the point being is that we'll give every excuse if it's from an Islamic person, such as mental health or anything like that, but we're not going to talk about ideology, and we're not going to talk about like fundamental hate that is being pushed by certain ideologies. I don't believe that it's mental illness. I believe that maybe you could blame it on propaganda. But I think in this instance, the thing that we should be talking about is more of what are the ideologies behind this and not the mental health aspect of it.
You don't think that this could be like he's got mental problems, and so the context that he comes from may have some ideological bent, but he's just mental, like he is unstable mentally. Maybe he's off his meds, or maybe he's got, a true like bipolar schizophrenic disorder, and he just goes off the rails. Do you think that that's not a possibility here?
I think it is a possibility, but I think that where we have come, especially with the way the media treats things, is that if it's a white person or a right-wing radical, we're going to put mental health way down on the chopping block, and we're going to bring ideological extremism to the forefront. Sure. And we're going to show the rebel flags, and we're going to show all of the crazy pictures that depict right-wing terrorism, whereas we have an Islamic terrorist attack, and we have put mental illness far in front of his ideologies. Why he chose that particular synagogue? Where I believe that we're all asking the wrong questions here, and we're focused on mental health. And we all know that mental health is an issue in the United States, but I don't think we could just blanket everything with, especially when it's trying to fit a particular narrative.
Well, we got to find the truth, right? We can't just decide.
And Amity, feel free to
to
chime in. I know that you are a Muslim, you are an active Muslim, and I don't want to offend you or anything, but that's just as a lame white dude that doesn't know anything.
There are so many facts that goes into whether this was a radical Islamic attack that's been planned by a radical Islamic organization, or is just an individual act of someone who has a mental health. As myself, someone who has lived among terrorists, worked undercover around terrorists for 5 years of my life, I have never met a mentally healthy terrorist myself.
That's a great point.
It is, and it truly is. And like like when you say a terrorist and radical Islamist, usually it is people that are mentally disturbed, and there's exactly why they reach a certain level. But when it comes to Akram and his attack, I know previously you guys were asking the other police officers why Texas, why specifically that area. The reason why, because he believed that Dr. Afiat Siddiqui, who was actually the Pakistani scientist that we have in our prison, there is information that is indicating that she might be in Fort Worth, Texas, in one of the prisons over there. And that's why he thought Texas would be a great point of attack. The second reason that why would they go to a Jewish synagogue, because most radical Islamic believe that Jews are behind all the problems in the world. So they would choose most likely, number one, a Jewish religious place over a Christian religious place. So there's a lot of facts that goes into how this started, why is it started. But when you come back, you always, whether the FBI has considered this, I mean, it surprised me, it shocks me that our intelligence agencies is trying not to take this seriously. It shows me a lot of things in my book, that the people dealing with terrorism now are not the same people that I dealt with, who are the generation after 9/11, who went above and beyond the call of duty to get information, to interrogate, to distinguish radical Islamic organizations and know who they are. And now we are dealing with a whole new generation in the intelligence community. That's extremely disappointing, because if you don't need to think about it, whether this was an Islamic radical Islamic attack or not. It is a radical Islamic attack, and there's facts and there's information that I'm going to bring up that's going to make sense to whoever listening to this. Akram was in the UK. He was granted a visa to enter the United States. Akram has criminal records, which I don't know how our government was able to grant a visa for someone who has attacked someone with a baseball bat, who had harassment charges, who had all kind of charges on his records. And the one thing that the British intelligence or the British government idiotically have stated, that he is just a mentally unstable person, and he is not a threat to society. The one part they missed is that he has been placing radical signs all over his place where he lives. This guy has been radicalized. And when you think about the UK got one of the most extremist population of Wahhabis. Mm-hmm. Wahhabis are where Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State fighters believe. This is the ideology they come from. This is what they believe. And the UK is the biggest nest for individuals like that, because they don't go hard on them as they should be. So that's why they got more freedom. They got more room to radicalize people. And he has been inspired by the Wahhabi community over there. And this is exactly how many ISIS fighters joined the fight recently in Syria and Iraq, from the same region, from the same area. So why is the FBI not considering this a radical Islamist, when the same exact people from his hometown went to Syria and Iraq and committed acts of terrorism, and they were considered radicals and terrorists? But when this guy attacked the United States on his own, I mean, look, a terrorist does not need to be a member of ISIS or Al-Qaeda to conduct an attack. Mm-hmm. Some of these terrorists, most dangerous terrorists that these organizations ever recruited, it was online. It was people they never met, they never spoke to. They sent them training videos online, just like the Boston bombers, and let them do it themselves. Yeah. So it really shocks me, it bothers me, if someone who have worked in that world, who have dived in that world in the deep levels, that the new generation of agents or the media, I don't know what their point or what, but when you're talking about her, she's charged with 86 years in prison. Her story is that she was arrested. She was actually wanted by the intelligence community right after the arrest of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, which is the planner of 9/11. Her name somehow was brought up. She was called Miss Al-Qaeda, and she ran to Afghanistan, and in 2008 she was arrested. And then in 2010, she was handed to the U.S. And charged with the attempt to murder of an American officer. This is actually someone who, when she was arrested, this is information that's not out there. When she was arrested, they found plans of the New York, the State Empire Tower.
Empire State Building.
In New York, yeah, Empire State Tower in New York. They found another plans for the couple bridges in New York City. And they also find plans of her trying to conduct a possible chemical attack in the United States, because she is a scientist. She specialized in a very different areas in that aspect, and she was trying to conduct a chemical attack. This is very dangerous move right now, because this could be a test. This could be just a way to test the water here in the United States to see how things goes. And what scares me the most, that I'm scared of, is that this is going to encourage more radical Islamists to conduct similar operations, because now they know they can negotiate with our government. They can take their time and do what they have to do. There might be a possibility, because I do believe if there is a next one, this won't be the last one. The next one will be more professionally done. It will be much more harder to knock down, or it won't be a one guy that we have to take down. And then what are we going to do next? Is release Al-Qaeda prisoners who try to conduct attacks in our country because somehow we have to save our children. This is a very dangerous move that America is going into.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching this clip of the Failure to Stop podcast. If you like the show, the clips that you're seeing here, you can listen to the full episode wherever podcasts can be found. Be sure to drop that 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you want to connect with us on social media, look for Failure to Stop, whatever platform you're on.